Coming face to face for the first time, Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump shake hands, officially beginning a summit at the Southern White House. We've got team coverage of the high-stakes meeting straight ahead.
Live from Washington, this is a CGTN special report.
Hello there, and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Mike Walter in Washington, D.C. Right now, the leaders of the world's two largest economies are meeting in Florida. Chinese President Xi Jinping is in the U.S. for his first face-to-face meeting with President Trump. CGTN's Nathan King joining us now from Palm Beach, where dinner and diplomacy are taking place. Nathan, no shortage of topics for the two to discuss. What should we expect?
Well, we can expect a lot of laughter, jokes even, handshakes. The atmosphere has been extremely cordial since both President Xi and Madam Peng arrived at Mar-a-Lago. Just behind me, you can see the tower glinting as darkness falls here. Donald Trump seemed very genial. They seemed relaxed in each other's company. And as they sat down to dinner, he made these remarks.
I just want to say it's a great honor to have the President of China and his incredibly talented wife, a great celebrity in China, a great singer. It's an honor to have you in the United States. We've had a long discussion already, and so far I have gotten nothing, absolutely nothing. But we have developed a friendship, I can see that. And I think long term, we're going to have a very, very great relationship, and I look very much forward to it.
You can see President Trump there really turning on the charm, making a joke. I've got absolutely nothing. And also praising Madam Peng's singing career. We should also add she's a professor, highly educated as well. But it really seemed a very jovial atmosphere. One could contrast, for example, similar meetings of heads of state, but at the White House, one thinks of Angela Merkel. That was very frosty. So they seem to be getting on. But of course, time will tell. They have 24 hours together and lots of tough issues. But the day has been one of protocol and personality. Let's take a look. First one president arrives and then another, together representing 40% of the global economy and over 1.5 billion people. President Xi and Madam Peng and the Chinese delegation met by US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. They know each other already, following his recent two-day trip to Beijing. Before politics, it was protocol and personal. The US President and First Lady greet their Chinese guests. A lucky red tie for him and a lucky red dress for her. President Xi in a blue tie and Madam Peng wearing a modern twist on a traditional xipao. Tough issues to be dealt with, but for now, building a lasting relationship is top of the agenda as the two leaders take a walk before dinner. And then dinner is served. The US and China opposite each other, but the presidents face to face for the first time. Yeah, it looks really nice and sumptuous club, as you know, over 100 rooms there. You know, here on West Palm Beach, Mar-a-Lago here in the background. It's about as far away, Mike, as you can get from the world's crises, and perhaps gives an opportunity for both these leaders to step back, think of perhaps new solutions in terms of tackling them. There are quite a few, especially the bubbling crisis in Syria. The United Nations Security Council has also just passed a resolution condemning the latest ballistic missile test in the DPRK. So let's analyze the issues. Let's bring in my colleague Wang Guan, our chief political reporter, who's with me here in West Palm Beach in front of Mar-a-Lago. Wang Guan, what issues are going to be the stickiest and what's the way forward?
I think we have been learning from the Chinese side, from the Chinese delegation, that they're trying to lower the expectations, saying that a chief mission for this trip is for President Xi to establish a very good and cordial personal relationship with President Trump. So going forward, they have all these mechanisms to deal with trade, to deal with people-to-people exchange, and to deal with maritime military security issues. So this time around, they really want to talk talk philosophically and strategically about issues. Well, of course, they're going to touch on some very specific matters and then draw a broad picture on how they want to solve those issues. For example, the DPRK, the Chinese side has been saying that they want a dual-track approach, denuclearization from the DPRK and demilitarization from the American side. Tens of thousands of troops are based there and hundreds of military exercises every year. So on trade, the Chinese side has been saying that they want a reciprocal and win-win situation in terms of bilateral investment and bilateral trade. So hopefully they can talk about those issues. But again, expectations are that they can form a very cordial relationship. So going forward, they can set a tone and set a direction for the lower ranking level working groups to figure those specific issues out.
Yeah, you know, it seems a contrast between just about a week or so ago, or just a few days ago, when Donald Trump tweeted out that these meetings are going to be difficult and seeing the cordiality in the room. So we have to just think whether the warmth of the occasion was making Donald Trump make those nice words, or whether the US president thinks that the words he said tonight will begin a fruitful relationship. We'll wait and see. We'll bring you everything, of course, Mike, from here, West Palm Beach, and Mar-a-Lago just behind me.
All right, gentlemen, thanks so much. So what are the expectations from this first face-to-face meeting between Trump and Xi? I spoke to Professor Dolly Yong from the University of Chicago, who says this might be a chance for the two countries to reset their relationship.
When the two presidents get to meet outside of Washington or the capitals, usually they have done very well. In fact, going back in the history of the U.S.-China relations, that has been the case, whether it's Hangzhou or Texas or Sunnylands. So sort of, I think actually this gets the atmosphere back in the warmer kind of setting rather than the austere kind of diplomatic confrontational approach. And of course, the Chinese side is actually very wary after the rocky start to this relationship. But again, that's not unusual with new presidents being inaugurated in the United States. They are pretty used to that. So we've got some professionals on both sides handling this, trying to get it back on track. And the relationship, I do think, actually is getting back on track with this meeting.
We were looking at imagery now as we're talking to you, and it looks like they're very comfortable with one another as they meet there in Mar-a-Lago. The U.S. president, though, has had a really rough patch since his inauguration, numerous setbacks. Of course, the most recent, the failure on getting through this repeal and replace legislation on health care. So how important is this summit for him in terms of it going well? What's at stake for him? Which one has more at stake?
Well, for President Trump, he may have a little bit more at stake. In fact, he deliberately tweeted about sort of how tough it would be to be bargaining with the Chinese. And of course, he's always emphasized that the Chinese are good negotiators and so on. So he's actually downplayed expectations. But there's no doubt that he would like this meeting to go well from his perspective to show the Americans that he can have some deliverables. And I do think actually the Chinese side came to Florida expecting that they want to offer certain things and so that actually the US side can claim some victory. But on the other side, the Chinese can also go home and say, number one, we've righted the relationship. The U.S. continues to adhere to the One China policy. And of course, there are a variety of other issues that we can work on together, even though there are some differences. Managing conflicts is the fundamental strategy for the Chinese. They don't want to have conflicts overflowing and ruining the relationship. They want to contain the conflict while focusing on the common interests.
These two countries have very different views on what to do with the DPRK, though. The U.S. wants this tougher stance. China is advocating diplomacy. Do you think there's going to be much headway there?
Not as much. This is a much more intractable issue for both countries. And I think actually the two countries are getting closer. There is significant, palpable public dissatisfaction with North Korea. And of course, over time, more and more Chinese have come to the realization that North Korea has gotten off to some extent of the Chinese orbit and has become too wayward for the good of the Chinese interests. In that sense, that strained relationship shows that there may be a more common interest between China and the United States with regard to the DPRK.
Professor DeLeong joining us earlier. As we've heard, both China and the United States say trade is a key issue in this relationship. In fact, Chinese investment is extremely important to the United States. Last year, Chinese investors funded 37 different projects in real estate and hospitality. That is the highest of any category, with information technology coming in second. Most of the Chinese direct investment in the U.S. comes from private firms, some $36 billion over the past decade. The government has directly funded $9 billion worth of direct investment. Chinese investment in the U.S. has created hundreds of new business operations and tens of thousands of new American jobs. One popular region is the American Midwest, where the focus has long been on the car. But Chinese investment is also looking to the sky. Hendrik Sabrandi reports.
These days, a trip down the highway is quieter than ever. In this age of hands-free phones and infotainment systems, drivers not only want to keep rain out of their vehicles, but noise as well.
You want a quieter cockpit. Our parts are the primary source of reducing cockpit noise.
Larry Williams is the head of Henniges Automotive, a company that manufactures rubber weather strips that fill the gaps in between a car's sheet metal.
We seal trunks, hoods, doors of vehicles, SUVs and trucks primarily.
These noise absorbers are more important than ever.
Our largest sector of our business is North America, and our greatest area for growth is China.
2 years ago, the Aviation Industry Corporation of China, or AVIC, bought this auto supplier to put its money to work in North America and gain access to the huge U.S. car market.
The Chinese car companies and suppliers know that if they want to be taken seriously, they have to be international conglomerates, global companies like the United States companies are.
Dustin Walsh, a reporter with the publication Crane's Detroit Business, says Chinese investment in Midwestern U.S. auto suppliers was up $2 billion last year over the year before.
If you want to play ball in this field, you have to be here.
The welcome mat is out in Detroit, the place that gave birth to the automobile. The city's Chinese Business Association actively works with companies looking to relocate here.
Find out the best location as well. Even if you need office furniture, you need to remodel the office, we'll have all that for you.
Henniges, with 17 plants around the world, including 5 in China and 4 in the U.S., was owned by a private equity firm before AVIC, with a more long-term vision and hands-off approach towards management, took over.
You will never find a happier CEO than one that went from a private equity owner to a Chinese owner.
They have a desire for the company to grow at a very fast rate.
With consumer demand for cars still strong, this facility in Missouri is humming 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. This 200-ton press encapsulates the fixed glass on the rear door of a General Motors SUV with rubber. It takes 2 to 3 minutes to complete each one. More than 600 employees here are too busy to worry about things like ownership.
For us, every day is business as usual.
Walsh believes Chinese investment in this part of America is here to stay.
It's gone smoother than I thought.
A relatively quiet business trend that doesn't get a lot of notice, but still may be picking up speed. Hendrik Sabrandi, CGTN, New Haven, Missouri.
President Xi Jinping is no stranger to the United States. As a young man, he visited the American Midwest, which has become a cradle for trade with China. But how does a state that helped Donald Trump become president deal with his hostility directed at China? CGTN's Owen Faircloth reports from Iowa.
And the red wine. Have some blackberry and plum aromas.
Few pleasures break down international barriers quite like wine. And Mason Groban's family are breaking a new frontier in the American Midwest. President Xi Jinping drank their Iowa wine when he returned to a state he calls home as vice president in 2012.
It was honestly a really cool thing at the time, so unexpected when he came here and tried our wines. It was a real honor for us to be part of that. And now that he's coming back, it just really shows the tie that he has to Iowa.
Jasper Winery is leveraging that presidential seal of approval, looking to expand in China after an initial export of nearly 1,000 bottles. But wine isn't the only Iowan product China is interested in.
I'm driving through the heart of Iowa's farming community. You can really see why they call this America's breadbasket. And increasingly, the crops grown here and the machinery used to produce them are heading to China. Since 2006, Iowa's exports to China have grown hugely by more than 250%. To put that in context, during the same period, Iowa's exports to the rest of the world grew by just a third. And Iowa is witnessing a new trend, a surge of not just Chinese investment, but cultural interest. Muscatine is at the heart of it. President Xi has made this small town on the Mississippi River an unlikely destination for Chinese visitors. Xi spent a few nights here while visiting Iowa to study agriculture in the mid-1980s. Businessman Glad Chung has turned the home into a cultural center to foster China-US relations.
For our president, Xi stayed.
This is where he stayed back in 1985?
Yes, yes.
But it's clear both sides needed to adjust to this new relationship.
At the beginning, they don't understand me. I also don't understand them. So it takes us 3 years to stay here.
Local Republicans are also adjusting to how President Donald Trump will cultivate his relationship with President Xi. There are probably few other American towns that have embraced China in the way that Muscatine has, and yet you helped elect a president who's come out with some fairly strong rhetoric against China, threatening to impose tariffs. How do you square that circle?
And there's definite concerns about the tariffs that may be placed on China. Hopefully we can find a policy that absolutely fits our interests, but at the same time doesn't alienate any opportunities, the economic opportunities that we have with China.
Even so, a trade war with China would be problematic for Iowa, having invested so much both financially and emotionally in China. But at Jasper Winery, the trade group set up to promote bilateral trade with Iowa is optimistic.
All this tough talk is really President Trump setting the stage so he can negotiate a better deal from the trade relationship with China. And at the end of the day, we want good trade deals, and negotiation is a good thing.
A reminder that perhaps the best way to harmonize this complex yet crucial trade relationship may be over a glass of something good.
Say a few more months to kind of let it mellow out, but I think it's well on its way.
Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Iowa.
Exploring the strong cultural ties between China and the United States, we take a closer look at how people in the two countries view each other as our special coverage of the Xi-Trump summit continues.